Hey guys, Marsengan here bringing another Dragon Ball Z Dokkan battle video, and so today we are going to be talking about the overall quality of the Tanabata units, whether the Tanabata Celebration in terms of the two main summonable units has been a success or not, and also we're going to look back a little bit over some of the previous Tanabata celebrations to get an idea on what our expectations probably should have realistically been. This is all brought on by a question that somebody asked in the chat this morning, and it led me to think about this in a little bit more detail, because I started to think, you know, our Tanabata, we kind of expect these units to be pretty good because this is a celebration that, you know, we have the two biggest celebrations of the year, which used to be the anniversary and the worldwide, which obviously now is whatever. I keep forgetting what they're renaming the anniversary to, but in February, and then the Global Dokkan campaign. Those are the two biggest celebrations. If we're making like a tier list for celebrations, right, those are the two that are in the top tier. They're the ones that we expect to be the best. They're the ones where we expect the units to be the best units in the game. The Global Dokkan campaign basically gave us the 4 new best units in the game with the 4 headliners. Even with Gohan, Goten and Trunks coming out in the EX, they were easily like top 5 on release, at, you know, at worst easily in the top 10. So those are the two biggest celebrations. Then obviously much lower down the tier list we have like the filler celebrations, just the random Dokkan Fest that come out. Then as we start to move up the list, we have things like Saiyan Day, the New Year Dual Dokkan Fest, where expectations are a little bit higher. And then of course we have the Tanabata. Now I think for a lot of people, when you think about some of the good units that have come out for previous Tanabata celebrations, I feel like a lot of people would put the Tanabata as probably like the next tier below like the anniversary and everything, right, of the ones that we would expect to be some of the best ones that we're seeing in the game with some of the best units, because obviously they always release as LRs. We're now in the trend where the part 2 is a carnival LR, usually double rates. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's very appealing about the celebration and about the format and the unit types. However, I think a lot of people will agree, not everyone, I'm sure, as is the way of life, but a lot of people will agree, I think, that this one has been a little bit disappointing overall in terms of the unit quality. Now, when we talk about Golden Frieza and Gogeta, I think Golden Frieza is quite underwhelming outside of the active skill turn. Certain events, obviously, he can still be quite good, tanking nicely in like the first turn if you can get some hits in, especially if he doesn't get super attacked straight away. Then having the active skill, or even just using the active skill straight away on some teams, like using him on the Omega team, using his active skill basically straight away and just floating him off, gives you like a really powerful turn 1 to start setting up the other units on the team. Like, I think the Golden Frieza is solid for the most part. And then the Gogeta part of the card is really, really good. And I think Gogeta kind of stands out from some of the previous Tanabata characters that we are going to talk about in the video, because he has, as long as you run like orb changes and stuff with him, he has the potential to be one of those units that just doesn't really age, because as long as you get 10 orbs with him, he has guaranteed dodge. So in any event, as long as dodge isn't cancelled, he's going to be able to avoid taking any damage whatsoever. And obviously we get the ability from the Frieza where on the turn where the exchange is first available, Frieza makes a bunch of orbs, and then Gogeta has an active skill to change the entire field into a certain type of orbs. So you can consistently get those turns with him where he is going to be able to have 100% dodge. Obviously, as he starts to age out in terms of his defense, if you're getting into events and you just keep missing being able to get 10 orbs, then he does become dodge or die as he'll start to age. But like if you're running him with orb changes and stuff, like I say, as long as you're getting 10 orbs, it's like the Broly trio. As long as you're getting 7 orbs, right? They just can't take damage. Therefore, they're always going to be useful. And on the flip side, of course, the positive side, this guy hits like an absolute truck. So he's going to be very, very good for quite a while. I do like this unit overall. I think they are good. The Gogeta part of the card, I think, is definitely more impressive and will age better. But yeah, something to think about. Then, of course, we go on to the part 2 unit from this Tanabata celebration, which is the Wrathful Broly. Now obviously I've talked about this guy a lot. I did a couple of different videos using him on different teams, and then I made the video yesterday to kind of summarize my feelings on him after using him in a bunch of things. I think he's very disappointing. I didn't feel like I made an overly like more videos than I usually do on this kind of subject, so shout out to the person that was like, oh, yet another video about this, we get it, you don't like him, which I really don't feel like I made. I always do the community response video, then I made a couple of videos using him in different events, which I basically always do, and then yeah, I made a video to summarize that actually I feel like he was a massive fumble, which I guess I don't usually do a follow-up summary video, but Broly's kind of in a unique position where I'm usually not so disappointed with a character after they've released and then I've played with them for a bit, so maybe it is like a special case. But I guess you can include this as another video talking about how much I don't like him if you want. But yeah, I think he's a massive fumble. He's good in one game mode. He definitely should have been better to be better in other modes. I did say in that previous video though, like if we do switch into a meta of longer form events soon, or like even with the 11th anniversary, he has the potential to be good and to have value. But I think overall, releasing at this point, like when he has released, I think he is a massive disappointment. I genuinely think like if you spent a bunch of stones summoning for him, like just to pull that one copy, I feel like overall you'd probably be disappointed. And that's what I kind of wanted the theme of the video to be, and probably what the title will be. It's like, is the Tanabata a celebration that is actually really worth your stones, or like worth your attention anymore? Because for free to play or low spending players, we always say you should be focusing on the anniversary and then what is now the global Dokkan campaign. And obviously this celebration comes out not long after the global Dokkan campaign, so it's, you don't get a huge amount of time to like restock up stones or anything. And then by the time this celebration is done and we get to the end of September, we've then really only got like 3 months until the anniversary again. So do you really want to be investing all in these characters? And this is where the idea of the discussion and the idea for this video really did sort of come about, is the fact that when we look back at previous Tanabatas, like I said at the very beginning, when somebody asked me about it earlier, my initial thought was, oh yeah, you know, the Tanabata is usually really good. Like we would kind of always expect these units to be super good and to be worth summoning for. And then I started to think back about some of these previous Tanabatas and how they have gone, as to why it is we think that, or at least why I thought that in general, right? So if we rewind a couple of years and we go back to 2022, this is where the Vegeta and Trunks released for the first time, and these guys were on release the best unit in the game, generally agreed by most of the community. Obviously there's always going to be contrarians and whatnot, but generally on release considered the best unit in the game. So the Tanabata LR for 2022 came out, best unit in the game. They aged pretty well, obviously being a unit that kind of has to be locked in slot 1. Once they get to the point where they're not really defensively strong enough to be used in slot 1 in the meta anymore, then they kind of immediately age out, because they're then even worse if they're not in slot 1. But for a very long time, this unit was very, very good. It was used in a bunch of different team builds, was good for most of the events that were out at the time. Just overall, this unit was the best unit in the game. Obviously, Bond of Parent and Child, they still haven't given us another proper Bond of Parent and Child leader, because that category is absolutely ridiculous. So this unit was super, super good. Now, the Part 2 unit for the Tanabata of 2022 was the Fusion Zamasu, and he was decent on release. The only problem is most of the other extreme class Future Saga characters had kind of aged out by the time this guy came out. So even though technically you could run him on the team with the Vegeta and Trunks because they led Future Saga, it wasn't his best team. He didn't have like really optimal link partners with Big Bad Bosses, because like I say, a lot of the other Rose and Goku Black units and Zamasu and stuff at the time had aged out. So he was kind of in a weird spot. So overall, the Tanabata for that year was pretty good, mainly because Vegeta and Trunks were so good, and then Zamasu just being a yellow coin LR at the time for Part 2. A lot of people, like general sort of practice in the community for these kind of celebrations, was that most people would usually be skipping the Part 2 yellow coin LR anyway. So with these guys being so good, that Tanabata, I think, was fairly successful. I mean, back then, again, yellow coin LRs, like, we didn't have Pity. The other featured yellow coin LRs, I'm pretty sure, weren't particularly great. Like, the banner wasn't particularly good. So it's kind of not so much a thing specifically against Zamasu. It's just more so the format at that time was still not particularly great. But overall, a pretty decent Tanabata, right? So you could be forgiven with this one in mind for having that opinion that, okay, yeah, you know, the Tanabata is usually at a pretty decently high level. But then we move on to 2023. And this is where Full Power Super Saiyan 4 Goku came out. And this guy on release, he was super hype because people like Super Saiyan 4 Goku, people like Super Saiyan 4 in general for the most part. And this guy on release was pretty decent on JP when he came out. And the hardest event in the game at the time, I think, was the Shadow Dragon like Omega stage. And this guy was obviously very good in that event at that time. Now, unfortunately, much like Vegeta and Trunks, he was a unit that was locked into slot 1. Now, remember, for JP, because of the games not being synced at that time, this guy came out in June 2023. Now, for Global, he came out in November, and the big problem is that in the September to October sort of time frame, this is where the Worldwide Celebration used to be. This was the year that we got the Future Saga Worldwide Celebration with the Blue Boys and Tech Zamasu, and unfortunately, this guy got completely aged out by the Worldwide Celebration difficult content. That event with the Zamasu with the AoE, which went on to be notorious as like one of the most fiendish fights in the meta until the meta shifted, which for Global took even longer because of how long it takes to get to the next anniversary. So that was like the hardest event on Global for like 8 months, and units were just releasing that just weren't good in that event. So it was kind of a dire time where like the hardest event in the game, units were coming out that weren't even good in that event. So for Global, this guy released after the Worldwide Celebration. So on release, this guy was already not good in the hardest events in the game, which is obviously very disappointing. And then even from the perspective of JP, the fact that he aged out literally like what, June, we got July, August, September. So within 3 to 4 months of releasing, this guy basically aged out, which obviously is very, very disappointing. It's a shame because, like I say, aesthetically, very cool. He has the potential to be saved with a good Easy A. And obviously with Vegeta and Trunks having recently Easy A'd, we know that around a year from now, or at least a year from them getting their Easy A, this guy's one will be on the table. But yeah, unfortunately, this guy, very disappointing release, especially for Global, right? And then his Part 2 LR, I mean, let's not even get started on Omega Shenron on release, right? Because Omega Shenron, this has very rarely happened in the history of the game. It's probably happened a few other times as well overall. But to have a unit that, if you just read his passive at the time, like, if you took off GT bosses and just changed it to like extreme, like if this was a different character and he didn't have GT bosses as his like main sort of anchor, like this unit would have been good. Like in terms of the stuff he was doing in his kit, seemed pretty solid. It's just the fact that at the time, and let's be fair, pretty much all the time up until the GDC gave us all these buffs, GT bosses was just an absolutely terrible team that wasn't really capable of much at all. So this guy would have been good if he was usable on a much better team, but he wasn't. So he was the Part 2 LR for this celebration and was essentially useless, right? And then for Global, because of the way the sync used to work and how far apart some of these units would be, for Global, this guy didn't come out until January 2024. So at that point, I mean, GT Boss is even more outdated because, of course, we'd all had the worldwide content at this point and everything, which had already outdated the Super Saiyan 4 Goku. So yeah, this guy on release was just basically dead on arrival, especially for Global, which is then, of course, the case for Goku as well. So the 2023 Tanabata Celebration, really, in terms of when we think about overall unit quality, was just an absolute disaster. So definitely not a highlight. And then we move on to last year, and last year was interesting because we started to move into like accelerating into the sync, so there was a slightly shorter gap. But Tech UI Goku released, and this guy And as you can see here, like, it only took just over a month for him to then come out on Global. But Tech UI Goku's another one of those really interesting scenarios, because on release, people really liked him. Like, he was cool, he has the typical UI, sort of like dodge or die early on kind of setup. Then he transforms into the white-haired version of UI, has guaranteed dodge for that first turn. And then obviously the domain giving ability to cancel out dodge disabling, giving other allies extra dodge chance as well. This guy was really, really cool. The problem is he aged out very quickly as well, and largely due to the fact that the base version of the card isn't super great. So as we got to the point where events were harder in the earlier turns, this guy just couldn't really hold his own and was very much dodge or die fairly quickly into his like existence. Obviously he needs to be run with another Universe Survival Saga character, which isn't the end of the world for the team build that he wanted to be run on, but obviously it kind of hurts his ability to be splashed into other teams a little bit. But it's not the end of the world, right? It's not the Omega level, like, must be run on GT bosses. And then, to be fair, once he transforms, he doesn't really have a condition. So it's definitely not the end of the world. But yeah, this guy, it's kind of weird to think about. But on release, people did really like him. And then it just feels like he aged out super, super quickly. But unfortunately, that is kind of the way with UI Goku units in general. Because obviously they all sort of release with this same sort of build setup where they have a certain amount of chance to dodge, even if it is something like 70%, which is obviously very good. But then very quickly they age to the point where if they're not dodging, then they're just getting killed. So this guy, I feel like, was really well liked initially on release, but then also is another unit that aged out very quickly. Did he age out as quickly or quicker than this Goku? I'm not really sure. Maybe not, but then again, maybe so. It just seems like, again, another Goku releasing that seemed really hype, because just like Super Saiyan 4, UI Goku is a really hype character choice for a lot of people, but then before long had just aged out into being not really all that usable anymore. So that's a little bit unfortunate. And then, of course, for this Tanabata, then we go to the Part 2 LR, and the Part 2 LR was AGL Carnival Jiren. And this guy, I mean, I didn't pull him when he came out, because obviously we had to wait for him to come out on Global, and he debuted on the same banner as the Tech Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks. And I managed to pull the Gotenks, but not the Jiren. But because he'd already been out on JP, and we'd already seen people talking about him, I kind of already knew that I wasn't particularly fussed about whether I pulled him or not, because again, this guy, even on release, people weren't really super impressed with this guy. This guy, the only thing I really saw people talking about is the fact that when you go into his standby mode, he has the ability to essentially just have like 100% damage reduction, because he gets 11% damage reduction per key sphere obtained, and already has base damage reduction of 50%. So you only have to pick up 5 orbs, and then he literally can't take any damage. So that was an effect that was really, really good. But for the main part, the rest of the unit, like, there's nothing super, super impressive about the base form version. And then the full power version, he could hit really hard, and he's got 60% damage reduction. But again, I don't, like, he wasn't anything super, super crazy at the time. I remember him being somewhat good and, like, really good for the Goku and Frieza fight, but overall just not anything like super, super crazy. So again, this is another Tanabata Celebration with a Part 1 unit that seemed to age out very quickly, and then a Part 2 unit that was either basically unusable on release or just nobody really cared about on release, or didn't make a particularly significant impact like in the meta or anything. So unfortunately, it, like, looking back to these units and thinking about how this stuff went, it does really make you think. Like I said earlier, when someone brought it up, my initial response was, oh yeah, but the Tanabata like units usually are really good, right? So we were expecting these units that were releasing this year to be really good. And then when you look back, especially over these last couple of years, actually the Tanabata units kind of have a track record now of not really particularly being all that great, or at least even if they are really good when they first come out, they then sort of age out fairly quickly. Especially, again, now that on both versions of the game, by the time this celebration wraps up in its now current time slot, the anniversary is going to be within another like 3 months. And so then these units are potentially just going to get power crept by the anniversary content. So let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. But to answer the overall sort of big question of the video, is the Tanabata Celebration worth it anymore? It kind of feels like the answer is no, unless we do get a unit, because people were impressed with Gogeta and Frieza and some of the crazy stuff that they were doing, but like, unless we see a unit that is just very clearly, like, when that unit comes out, similarly to like the Vegeta and Trunks, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, this is the new best unit in the game. Unless we get a situation like that again, it kind of feels like the Tanabata unit just isn't worth summoning for anymore. And then the same with the part 2 as well. But let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. Have you pulled both or either of the Tanabata units for this year? What do you think of them? Obviously, I keep saying Tanabata the whole time, even though it's Transcendent Dokkan campaign now, but we'll get used to that eventually. But let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Which was your favourite Tanabata if you've been playing the game for a while? Let me know what you think down below. So that is going to be it for the video, guys. This has been the Masked Ningen. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Check out the links down below, and I will see you all again soon. Have a good one.